Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
Tim was just too aggressive. Came in too square too early. When you're going to open up and you're so square onto your opponent, Team MURTAZALIEV must have been licking their lips. Like, yo, let's go. The timing on them power shots, they knew they could catch Tim cold. And it's obviously something they worked on. Tim will open up when he's square on. And when he got floored with that left hook, there was no way back. And MURTAZALIEV is a dangerous guy. I knew this was going to be a dangerous fight. Then he followed up in the second round, straight left. Tim was down again, and he was hurt. His legs were tremoring every time he was getting hit by them big shots. He had a glazed, wild-eyed look about him.
With a wide-eyed look.
There was one left hook that made his right foot come off the ground. Then a right hand at the back of his head put him down. But in the commotion, the referee didn't clock that, and Tim had to take another count. The referee jumped in just in time to stop MURTAZALIEV taking his head off as the bell sounded. But the third, that short left hook, he practiced shortening up his shots. Because I've seen him previously, and the way he was shortening up them shots, he was planning for Tim to come on square. And then that right hand that buckled him into the ropes, towel came in, and MURTAZALIEV defended his IBF title in grand fashion. Do the BBC have options on this guy? T Street said he was main events. Like, they were banking heavily on Tim Tszyu because No Limit bankrolled this card apparently. This is all Australian money, even though the fight took place in America, Orlando. Some accounts will tell you that they actually gave the tickets away, literally gave the tickets away. And you have to ask yourself, why not stage this fight in Australia? Why have you come to America to give tickets away? Because you can't sell them. And Tim got blitzed. MURTAZALIEV's technique in turning over his punches, though, for such a tall man, has made him a household name, at least in the boxing community overnight. Tim's footwork was non-existent. He made it too easy for MURTAZALIEV. And don't get it twisted, MURTAZALIEV is a threat, even to Terence Crawford, but Crawford won't be there, standing square in front of him, just trying to open up to throw big punches, especially in the first round. Terence obviously had an interest in this fight. He observed Tim better change up that game plan and start moving his head coming in. He followed up that tweet when Tim was taken out by saying, "I told you." Like, Tim didn't even attempt to fill the fight out. And the thing is, Tim landed that overhand right early, and his plan was to sit in the pocket and trade shots. MURTAZALIEV was undersold as 7-1 underdog. Is that correct? Who's your daddy? Is what MURTAZALIEV screamed after. Who's your daddy? Say Allahu Akbar as well. Feeling himself. What the F happened is what Tim Tszyu said with his head down, dejected, in the post-fight interview. What the F happened? He couldn't understand it. He couldn't explain it. They asked him several questions on what went wrong, and he basically had to pass on the questions because he couldn't explain it. Lou DiBella, I guess he summed it up. He said, perhaps the worst career decision making for a star-level kid ever. Horrible promoter, manager, corner judgment in allowing Tim to continue in the Fundora fight, when he was bleeding out. And two, following that with a beast like this guy who brought no gate or name recognition to the fight. Yeah, this is what they turned down the Saudi offers for. 2 losses in a row for Tim Tszyu. And when you look at what Lou DiBella said about them letting him bleed out against Fundora, what's the fallout? The fallout is more psychological than physical. Peter Bedell, an Australian journalist covering the fight, said Tim was a little arrogant, thinking that he could just walk this guy down and blow him out. He also made reference to when Tim dabbed his head when there was a head clash with MURTAZALIEV. And Tim thought he was bleeding when he wasn't. Psychological scar tissue is what Peter Bedell called it, from the Fundora fight. And when you bleed like that for so many rounds, like he did against Fundora, I'm sure he's watched the fight back, and I'm sure he's heard what everyone said about the wound. And then the next fight, you're going in with this underdog who can fight. So Tim probably thought, I could just go in there and just knock him about. That's crazy, man. It's crazy. But in all fairness to Glenn Jennings, who's made some bad decisions on Tim's career, but we won't go into that now. But Tim probably didn't realise how psychologically he was affected by the last fight until he started fighting with the Russian yesterday. Then he realised that He's not over the Fundora fight yet. At least not ready to fight this level of opposition yet. Beforehand, Tim was saying he's not going to lead with his head because he doesn't want to get cut like he did against Fundora. But in the fight itself, the first clash of heads they had, him and MURTAZALIEV, it wasn't even a bad clash, and he's dabbing at his head. His head wasn't bleeding. That means he's not in the right headspace for this fight.
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
William Skull, I guess on what you would call home territory, is based in Germany. He won the vacant IBF super middleweight title just outside Berlin, outpointing Vladimir Shishkin over 12 rounds. I thought it was closer on the cards. William Skull, he had the quicker feet, quicker hands, and he pot-shotted a lot. Didn't really apply any steady pressure like that. He had some good moments landing single shots. Shishkin did attempt to apply pressure behind that double jab, but Skull, not a big puncher, landed the more eye-catching shots. And as the fight progressed, you could argue he was taking control of the bout. But in the 11th, should I say the 12th, his legs went to pieces, buckled everywhere. And it was hard to tell what hit him that did that to him. Complained to the referee. He looked distressed. He was bundled over. But he managed to see it through to the final bell and he got a decision, the UD, in a battle of unbeatens. Shishkin, a decent fighter, a little predictable. He took the defeat in his stride, didn't bitch, didn't complain. There was a sizable Cuban contingency in the arena, cheering Skull on. The fights went way under the radar. It was advertised that it would be on DAZN late Friday. Could be Christian Mbili up next for Skull. I think Mbili will beat him. Won't look pretty doing it, but I think he can get the job done. And it depends on the location. If it's in where this fight took place, just outside Berlin, then, you know, it could be tight. Because I thought Shishkin could have perhaps got a draw. You'd have to fancy Mbili.
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
Shannon Courtenay at the Copper Box Arena, London. She lost on points to Catherine Ramos, a Brazilian lady, 6-3-1. She just outslugged Shannon. Shannon inactive, not in top shape. Shannon was sluggish. She got caught with that left hook far too much. It was a decent fight though. You know, Shannon was crying the day before when she done an interview. Said that Matchroom, the phone stopped ringing because she turned down a fight, I believe, when she was burying her dad. And then she got into how people don't like her. She's not really a bad person. When it was really time to leave that behind and focus on the fight. And that goes for OHARA Davies, who retired after getting stopped predictably. I thought it would be either points or a late stoppage win for Azim. Beforehand, OHARA was talking about the media, how they treat boxers and how he's not taking shit. He just wasn't focused on the fight. He wasn't focused. But he said he was not in love with boxing no more. And that's it. He's packing it in. OHARA hinted that he was trying to let Azim punch himself out. And in the third, he opened up a little more. Landed a few power shots. Nice left to the body from Azim that sent OHARA to the canvas. The left hook that finished it in the 8th. I think OHARA could have continued, but, you know, it looked like his eye was bothering him and he didn't want no more. I'm not going to get into a debate whether he quit or not. Like, what I'm going to complain about is Johnny Nelson and Ben Shalom telling us that this was a more difficult fight than Harlem Eubank, who doesn't have the punch power of our OHARA Davies, but at the same time, like, OHARA Davies doesn't have the speed no more. He doesn't have the drive. He doesn't have the ambition. Harlem has way more ambition than this version of OHARA Davies. He's got faster feet, faster hands, throws a lot more punches. Got Adam Booth training him. He's in the gym all the time. Younger, fresher. What are you talking about? And trying to tell us that, yeah, this is a more difficult fight. OHARA's coming off a 1-round knockout. Hasn't been that active. Hasn't been that focused. It's crazy. But we all know it was damage control for whatever. Because Adam Azim and Ben Shalom are being embarrassed by Eddie Hearn and Dalton Smith. Adam Azim, after, is telling Dalton Smith, say what you got to say to my face. We're not interested in you playing our road, man. Adam Azim did what he had to do, but OHARA Davies in 2024, coming off a 1-round knockout loss, couldn't even be considered for an opponent for Dalton Smith. I don't even want to see Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith. Give us the fight that you promised when you got Eubank Sr. out and McGuigan. Give us the fight you promised. Adam Azim and Harlem Eubank. Give us what it says on the can and stop playing fucking games.
Stop, you play too much.
Come on.
Ben Shalom's talking about perhaps we better not televise some of our prospects' fights because of the pressure. I mean, what's going on there? Like, people are not paying to watch professional boxing to see grown men wrapped in cotton wool. This is the entertainment game. A lot of the boxing fans, they don't get it. Like, I heard Moses Atoma, when asked about a Johnny Fisher fight, he was saying, well, why would Johnny take a fight which could potentially end his career? No disrespect to Johnny, is what he said. And in the comment section, they started on Eddie Hearn because it's an easy target, when a lot of times it's just based on him being an easy target rather than any logic. They were saying, well, if the shoe was on the other foot, Eddie Hearn would be saying that Moses Atoma is ducking Johnny Fisher, citing Dalton Smith and Eddie going after Adam Azim. And what they don't understand, like, Johnny Fisher has a Southern Area title. That's no interest to Moses Atoma. Johnny Fisher isn't holding up traffic. It's Ben Shalom who decided to go for a prestigious belt like the European belt. When you get a European belt, you're often automatically ranked in the world rankings. That means you're ready to take on all comers. You don't pick up a European belt as a practice belt. Johnny Fisher is under no mandatory obligation to fight Moses Atoma, who probably would wipe the floor with him. There's a big difference here. Now let's say if Moses was to win the British title and Johnny was to swerve the fight after he was mandated to face Atoma, then you'd have a case. Adam Azim didn't only avoid defending his European title against his mandatory Dalton Smith, he also passed up his mandatory shot at Dalton Smith's British Championship. Don't you see the difference here? It's two different topics. And it's Ben Shalom who's forcing us into these ignorant, waste of time discussions on boxing with his average shows over there on Sky. They've plummeted so far from the Matchroom standards.
Boxing
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.
Michael Mickinson, he was outboxed and outfought by Tulani Mabenge from South Africa, who took the WBO welterweight title in the process. I like the way Mabenge put his punches together.
Boxing
Beats and rhymes.
no one can do it better.
Big up Jamie TKV from the ends. Big yourself up. He beat Franklin Ignatius. No, it wasn't a pretty fight because Franklin was looking to spoil and hold when Jamie was trying to put the pressure on and throw in body shots. Yeah, Jamie roughhoused him with the forearm and got cautioned, but he did the right thing. He intimidated Frank, who looked like he choked in the sixth, and the referee had enough after taking a point away from Frank for excessive holding. And then the head clash where Frank was cut totally demoralized any ambitions he had of winning that fight. And while Jamie wasn't landing anything devastating in the sixth, he was working the body. Franklin didn't want it and the referee stopped it. Big up Jamie.
Boxing
Beats and rhymes.
no one can do it better.
No wins in the last three for Dan Azeez, 35 years of age, but he's definitely an overachiever. Former British, European, Commonwealth champion at 175. He lost a close one, a majority decision to Lewis Edmondson. I saw the highlights, like Lewis made use of the range, picked some nice shots. Dan tried to close the gap, but he looks like he's lost a step or two. The vacant British title and Commonwealth was on the line. Looks like Dan could be transitioning into gatekeeper mode. Nothing wrong with that. Still pick up some good purses. If he can pick up a win or two, he can definitely make some decent money. Second loss in Dan's career, he's 22-1 now with 13 inside the distance. You have to wonder if he'll ever be in a position to get a world title shot. And Ben Shalom, under his watch, had Dan Azeez turn down a world title shot against Dimitri Bivol. Now, perhaps they knew they didn't have a chance of winning it. Perhaps. But Eddie Hearn put the fight on the plate for Dan Azeez, and he turned it down. Lewis Edmondson, he's 10-0 with only 3 stoppages. He's been calling out Ben Whittaker quite a bit now. And I'm guessing he's really chomping at the bit for the fight now. His fight actually became the main event. When the event was promoted, the Adam Azim, OHARA Davies was the main event. But Lewis Edmondson brought a considerable amount of fans to the arena, outselling the supposed star, Azim. They had to switch it up and make this the main event. Louis Edmondson from Southampton is outselling local fighters to the area like Anthony Yarde, who was born in Hackney. I'm just quoting what's being said. I don't dislike Tunde, I don't dislike Anthony Yarde, but they have said often that they are the A-side to Joshua Buatsi. Well, that would mean that he should be bringing more fans to the Copper Box than Louis Edmondson.
Boxing,
Beats and rhymes.
no one can do it better.
Yarde scored a knockdown with literally his first punch of the fight against Ralph VILCANS from Latvia. But VILCANS, had only lost one in 18 fights going into this contest. Obviously, he's not used to staying on the canvas or being on the canvas, and he had good height and reach, and he used it very effectively against Yarde. He saw this as his big opportunity for a lot of punches. The referee scored this fight 92-98. Many people think it was a little closer. Post-fight, Yarde said the worst thing was scoring that knockdown because it made him get a little right hand happy chasing the KO. Tunde told him work everything off the jab. When the body is there, make sure you target your attack there. And he did some good work. But so did VILCANS. He done some good work. He just didn't have the power to stop Yarde attempting to walk through him. In the 6th round, Yarde landed a sickening shot to the torso, a left hand, and it had my guy hurt really bad. But he was tough. He was brave. VILCANS, 30 years of age. He wasn't particularly fast, but he was prepared to throw in volume, and he was able to get through with 1-2s, and he got off some nice combinations. The 10th, Yarde went to the Philly shell, shoulder roll thing, went to the body, and he looked a little more comfortable in that round, and perhaps he chased the knockout a little too much in this one. They often talk about ring rust in fighters, but the coaches of these fighters who are inactive, what about them? Both Yarde and Tunde, they looked a little tense in there. And when I look at the 10th round, it got me thinking that Yarde should perhaps have been trying to walk his man into more shots, mixing it up, slug, walk him down, and then when necessary, use the Philly shell, the shoulder roll, the pull counter, and walk him into some shots. But when you're out the ring so long, you're going to get tense performances like that. It wasn't the worst fight for Yarde. He's been inactive. Yeah, it would have been nice to get the knockout, and it would make for more pleasant headlines. But he's not really fighting for the press and media. Surely, he's fighting to get big fights. 1-round blowouts are nice, but they don't tell you what you need to improve on while you've been inactive, while you haven't been in the ring with serious opponents. A lot of boxing fans were disappointed when they asked Yarde about the Buatsi fight. He said, yeah, there's AZEEZ, there's Craig Richards, there's other fights he can take. Buatsi was in the crowd. He wasn't impressed with Yarde's performance, and word got around that Team Buatsi are moving on from the Yarde fight. So I don't know what's happening there. I did tell you guys that I was privy to a conversation on Twitter. From what I was hearing, that fight was as far away as it has been, even when Yarde was on Queensberry. Egos, isn't it, about A-side? That's one of the issues. Yarde was saying when he becomes a free agent, we're going to go and make this Buatsi fight. Listen, when these fighters, and I'm not talking about Yarde specifically, talk about their free agents, don't be all gassed up thinking you're going to get all the fights that you asked them to take, or it's going to improve their situation drastically overnight. Seconds Out referenced the dispute with Frank Warren over the matching rights, or how many fights he had left with Queensberry, and if that didn't affect his performance, all the stuff going on outside the ring. And he said yes. And while a lot of people are going to say, well, you're making excuses. No, it's not an excuse. He's a distracted fighter. A lot of these fighters just have so much distractions. Got to keep this real. Yarde is into his 30s now, and to me it looks like he hasn't yet found his identity, whether he wants to be a boxer or a slugger. And I've heard and seen people this morning critiquing Tunde Ajayi as his choice of coach. Is he the right man? I can't pinpoint anything particular in the last fight why they should split. Tunde's his coach, and that don't look like it's going to change anytime soon. They've just got to keep going. They've got to be more active, man. They've got to be more active. The 10-round fight, it's not going to hurt him. It's not the end of the world. But while Yarde looked in physically good condition, it's different training to stay in shape than training for a fight. And that's what's affecting a lot of fighters out there right now.
Boxing.
Beats and rhymes.
No one can do it better.